The shuttle doors hissed open and I stepped into air so thick with humidity it felt like breathing through wet cloth. 3 days ago I'd been scrubbing reactor cores on a mining station. 2 days ago the diplomatic corps had pulled me into a white room and told me I was getting married. Yesterday they'd sedated me for the journey. Now I stood on a landing platform carved from living crystal, surrounded by creatures that made my spine lock up with instinctive fear. The Gentari towered over me, their scaled bodies reflecting the violet sky in patterns that hurt to look at directly. 6 limbs each. Heads that split horizontally when they spoke, revealing rows of crystalline teeth. They wore nothing but jewelry that pulsed with bioluminescent light, marking ranks I couldn't begin to understand. Marcus Webb? The translator implant behind my ear rendered the clicking sounds into flat, emotionless words. Yes. My voice cracked. I was 26 years old, nobody important, and apparently someone's solution to a political problem. The bonding ceremony begins at sunset. You will be prepared. The lead Gentari gestured with a clawed hand and 2 others moved forward, flanking me. Not hostile. Just absolute. Their skin smelled like ozone and something else, something that made my hindbrain scream predator. They led me through corridors that seemed grown rather than built. The walls pulsed faintly, as if breathing. Other Gentari stopped to watch me pass. Some hissed, mouths splitting wide. Others simply stared with eyes like molten gold. I kept my gaze forward and tried not to stumble. The preparation chamber was vast and empty except for a pool of dark water at its center. Steam rose from the surface. One of my escorts touched my shoulder and I flinched despite myself. You will cleanse. You will dress. You will speak only when the Queen addresses you directly. The translator made every word sound like a threat. Wait. I turned to face them. The Queen? I thought I was marrying a diplomat's daughter or something. That's what they told me. Silence. Then both Gentari tilted their heads in unison, a gesture I'd learned meant confusion. You were told incorrectly. The first one spoke. You will bond with Queen Shra, Monarch of the Gentari Collective, voice of the 7 moons, guardian of the deepening. My legs went weak. That's not possible. It is decided. They left before I could form another protest. I stood there for maybe 5 minutes, hard hammering, before the absurdity penetrated the shock. The diplomatic corps had thrown me into a marriage with an alien queen. Not a noble. Not a scientist or cultural liaison. The actual ruler of a species that controlled 14 star systems and had nearly wiped out humanity during first contact 30 years ago. Someone had made a catastrophic mistake, and I was standing in the middle of it. The water in the pool was blood-warm and smelled like metal. I stripped and submerged myself, scrubbing away 3 days of cold sweat and fear. When I emerged, I found clothes laid out on a bench I'd swear hadn't been there before. Simple black fabric that felt like silk but adjusted itself to fit perfectly. No shoes. The Gentari didn't wear them. An hour passed. Maybe 2. I'd lost track of time somewhere between the shuttle and this room. Then, the walls brightened with orange light, and a different Gentari entered. This one was smaller, decorated with silver bands around each limb. Come! The Queen waits. We walked through passages that spiraled upward. Other Gentari joined us, forming a procession. They began to hum, a sound that resonated in my chest and made my teeth ache. The corridor opened into a chamber so large I couldn't see the far wall. Thousands of Gentari filled the space, all humming that same bone-deep note. At the center stood a raised platform. And on that platform, she waited. Queen Shra was twice the size of any Gentari I'd seen. Her scales shifted through colors I didn't have names for, patterns that seemed to spell words in a language my eyes couldn't quite read. She wore a crown of living metal that moved like water, catching the light from 7 moons visible through the crystal ceiling. Her eyes found mine across the distance, and I forgot how to breathe. She was terrifying. Ancient. Beautiful in a way that had nothing to do with human aesthetics, and everything to do with pure, overwhelming presence. I was supposed to marry her. My escort nudged me forward. I walked on legs that didn't feel connected to my body. The humming grew louder. Queen Shara descended from her platform with movements that looked like controlled violence. Each step deliberate. Each motion filled with power that could crush me without effort. She stopped 3 feet away. This close, I could see scars on her scales. Old wounds that had healed into raised patterns. She had fought. She had survived. Marcus Webb. Her voice bypassed the translator entirely, resonating directly in my skull. You are afraid. It wasn't a question, but I answered anyway. Yes. Good. She tilted her head, studying me with an intensity that made me want to run. Fear means you understand what stands before you. Your diplomats sent you here to die. The humming stopped. Silence crashed down like a physical weight. I stared up at her, confused and terrified and suddenly, finally angry. Then why am I still breathing? Something flickered across her alien features. If I'd had to name it, I would have called it approval. She raised one clawed hand and the crowd began to hum again, softer this time. Different. Because I have waited 300 years for someone to ask me that question. She extended her hand, palm up. An offering. A challenge. And because your species, against all reason, might be worth saving. I looked at her hand. At the assembled thousands watching us. At the moon's burning cold fire above. The diplomatic corps had thrown me away. They'd sent me here expecting me to fail, maybe expecting me to die, solving whatever political problem I represented by making me someone else's issue. But Queen Shara was looking at me like I was a person. Like I had a choice. I reached out and placed my hand in hers. Her scales were warm. Her grip was gentle despite the strength I could feel coiled beneath the surface. Then I guess we'd better make this interesting, I said. For the first time since I'd arrived, I saw Jintari smile. The ceremony began with fire. Not metaphorical fire, but actual flames that erupted from vents in the platform floor, surrounding us in a ring of blue-white heat. Queen Shara didn't flinch, and neither did I, though sweat immediately soaked through my clothes. The humming shifted into something rhythmic, almost like music. The bonding requires blood, Shara said, still holding my hand. Yours and mine. Mixed and witnessed. Do you consent? Every diplomatic briefing I'd received had stressed the importance of consent in Jintari culture. They valued strength, but they despised coercion. I'd wondered why they'd agreed to an arranged marriage at all. Looking at Shara now, seeing the way she waited for my answer without assumption, I started to understand. This wasn't arranged. This was offered. I consent, I said clearly. She drew a claw down her own palm. Dark blood welled up, thick and luminescent. Then, she looked at me expectantly. I didn't have claws, but someone had left a small obsidian blade on the platform's edge. I picked it up with shaking hands and made a quick cut across my palm. Red human blood mixed with her alien ichor as she pressed our hands together. The crowd's humming exploded into something triumphant. The flames roared higher. Shara's eyes blazed with reflected firelight as she spoke words the translator couldn't process, ancient phrases that bypassed language entirely and settled into my bones as pure meaning. Bond. Alliance. Protection. Trust. Then, she released my hand and the ceremony was over. Just like that. No kiss, no exchange of rings, no pronouncement. Just our blood mixing in the firelight, and 7 moons bearing witness. We were married. The crowd dispersed with surprising speed, flowing out through exits I hadn't noticed. Within minutes the vast chamber was empty except for Shara, myself, and a small contingent of what I assumed were guards. They kept their distance but watched everything with unwavering attention. Walk with me. Shara's voice was softer now, almost gentle. She moved toward a corridor that branched away from the main passages. I followed because there was nothing else to do, and because despite everything, I wanted to understand. Why me? I asked when we were away from the guards. You're the queen of the Gentari. You could have refused this arrangement entirely. You could have married one of your own people, or stayed single, or demanded someone important. Why accept a nobody from a mining station? As Seichiro was quiet for so long I thought she wouldn't answer. We walked through gardens that grew under artificial starlight, plants that moved and whispered as we passed. Finally, she stopped beside a pool of still water that reflected the false sky above. 300 years ago, she said, I was not queen. I was a soldier. A good one. I fought in the war against your people when we first made contact. She touched the scars on her scales. These are from your kinetic weapons. Very effective. Very painful. We were winning that war, Marcus. We would have destroyed your species completely. I'd learned this history in school. The first contact war had lasted 18 months and killed millions on both sides before the ceasefire. What changed? A human ship was damaged in battle. It crashed on one of our agricultural worlds. The crew survived. 15 humans trapped behind our lines with no hope of rescue. Seichiro's claws traced patterns in the air. Our doctrine was clear. Take no prisoners. Show no mercy. I led the battalion sent to eliminate them. The water in the pool rippled though there was no wind. I waited. When we arrived at the crash site, the humans had taken shelter in a farming community. Our own people. Civilians. The humans had weapons. They could have seized hostages, could have killed everyone and held out for days. Instead, they were helping repair damaged irrigation systems, sharing their medical supplies, teaching our children how to sing songs in their language. She looked at me and her eyes held something I recognized. Shame. Wonder. They knew we were coming to kill them. They knew there was no escape. And they spent their last hours trying to help. What did you do? I stood at the edge of that community for 3 hours, watching through targeting scopes. My soldiers wanted to attack immediately. I ordered them to wait. I needed to understand. I needed to see if the humans were manipulating our people, using them as shields. But they were just being kind. Even at the end. Especially at the end. She drew in a long breath. I withdrew my battalion. I filed a report claiming the humans had escaped into the wilderness. I committed treason against my own people because I could not kill someone who spent their final hours teaching children how to sing. The weight of that confession settled between us. The war ended 6 months later. Because others like me had seen similar things. Because your people kept being inexplicably decent even when it made no tactical sense. We couldn't understand it. We still don't, not really. Seichiro turned to face me fully. After the war I rose through the ranks. I became queen because I argued most strongly for peace, for trying to understand humanity instead of fearing it. But there are factions among my people who believe that human kindness is weakness. Who want to restart the war and finish what we began. They grow stronger every year. And marrying me is supposed to stop that. Marrying you is supposed to prove them wrong. She stepped closer. Your diplomatic corps sent you here to fail. They chose someone with no training, no preparation, no important family connections. They expected you to offend me, or flee, or break down. They wanted the marriage to collapse so they could point to it as evidence that Gentari human relations are impossible. They're preparing for war too, in their own way. Anger burned through my shock. So we're both pawns. Yes. But pawns can become queens, Marcus. I've done it once already. She smiled again, that strange arrangement of crystalline teeth that shouldn't have looked friendly but somehow did. Your diplomats underestimated you. They sent someone they considered expendable, someone with nothing to lose. They didn't consider that such a person might actually try to succeed. You don't know me, I said. I might be exactly the failure they expected. You placed your hand in mine even after I told you that your government sent you here to die. You stood in the fire without flinching. And now you're arguing with me instead of cowering. Her tail moved in a gesture that my translator finally caught amusement. I know enough. We stood in that impossible garden under false stars, and I felt something shift in my chest. This wasn't the marriage I'd imagined in the terrified haze of the last 3 days. It was something stranger and more dangerous and infinitely more interesting. What happens now? I asked. Now we give them what they fear most. Shara's scales rippled with colors that spoke of determination. A real alliance. A true bond. Proof that humans and Gentari can build something together. It won't be easy. Most of my court opposes this marriage. Half of them will be working to undermine you from the moment you appear in public. Your own people will likely disavow you and try to extract you from what they see as a dangerous situation. Sounds fun. She laughed, a clicking sound that resonated in her chest. You're either very brave or very stupid. Probably both, I admitted. But I didn't come this far just to give up because it's difficult. And I'm tired of being expendable. Shara extended her hand again, the one we'd cut during the ceremony. The wound had already healed, leaving a thin scar across her palm. Then we begin. Together. I took her hand. This time it felt less like desperation and more like choice. There's something you should know, I said. I have no idea how to be married to an alien queen. I don't know your customs, your politics, or your language. I'm going to make mistakes. Good. If you were perfect, my people would suspect you were a spy or an infiltrator. Your imperfection makes you trustworthy. She started walking again, leading me deeper into the garden. Tomorrow you'll meet the court. They'll test you in every way they can imagine. Some will try to befriend you to use you against me. Others will try to break you to prove humans are weak. A few might actually want to help. How will I tell the difference? You won't. Not at first. But I'll teach you. We emerged from the garden into a corridor lined with windows looking out over a city that glowed with bioluminescent light. Millions of Gentari lives spread out below us, beautiful and alien and overwhelming. I've spent 3 centuries learning to read people, Marcus. Both my own kind and yours. You'll learn too, or you won't survive. The bluntness should have frightened me. Instead, it was oddly comforting. She wasn't pretending this would be simple. She wasn't offering empty reassurances. She was treating me like an adult who could handle truth. What was your first test? I asked. When you became queen? Shara stopped walking. Her silence stretched long enough that I thought I'd crossed a line. Then, she spoke quietly, almost to herself. They brought me 3 human prisoners. Survivors from a transport ship that had strayed into our territory. They were terrified, injured, and completely at our mercy. The court wanted me to execute them personally. To prove I was strong enough to rule. To show that my mercy during the war had been a momentary aberration. What did you do? I healed them. I gave them a ship. I sent them home. Her claws scraped against the window, a sound like glass breaking. And then, I challenged the 6 court members who had orchestrated that test to single combat. One by one. I won every fight. I made sure they survived so they could spread the message. I am strong enough to be merciful. Question it again and you won't live to regret it. I stared at her reflection in the window. The scars on her scales told stories I was only beginning to understand. That's why they fear you. Fear and respect are separated by the thinnest margin. She turned to face me. Tomorrow they'll test you. They won't challenge you to combat, you're not Gentari. But they'll test your resolve. Your intelligence. Your loyalty to me and to your own species. Some tests will be obvious. Others will be subtle enough that you won't realize you're being tested until afterward. Any advice? Be honest. My people can smell deception from across a room. If you don't know something, admit it. If you're frightened, don't hide it. If you disagree with me, say so privately but support me publicly. She moved closer, her voice dropping to something almost gentle. And remember that you're not alone. You're my spouse now. That means something to the Gentari. It means I've bound my fate to yours. If you fall, I fall. They know this. It's why some will try to destroy you and Others will try to protect you. No pressure then. Her laugh was warmer this time. You're going to do well, Marcus Webb. Better than you think. Your species has this quality, this stubborn refusal to accept impossible situations. It's why we couldn't destroy you during the war. It's why I think we might actually have a chance at making this work. We walked in comfortable silence for a while. Guards appeared at intersections, nodded to SHRA, and vanished again. The palace was massive, but it felt alive in a way that human buildings never did. The walls themselves seemed to watch us, protective rather than threatening. Eventually we reached a set of doors that opened into chambers I recognized as living quarters. Luxurious by any standard, but scaled for Gentari proportions. Everything was too large, too tall, built for people twice my size. These are your rooms, Shara said. Mine are through there. She indicated a connecting door. You can lock it if you wish. I won't be offended. Gentari marriages don't require shared sleeping spaces, and I doubt human ones do either. Thank you. I was suddenly exhausted, the adrenaline finally wearing off. Shara, can I ask one more question? Always. Do you actually think this will work? Really? She considered the question with the same seriousness she'd given everything else. I think it has to work. Because if humans and Gentari can't find a way to coexist peacefully, then we'll destroy each other. Not in another war. We're too evenly matched for that. But through suspicion, through sabotage, through 1,000 small conflicts that will bleed both our people dry over generations. She touched my shoulder with surprising gentleness. So yes. I think this will work. Because the alternative is unacceptable. She left me then, disappearing through the connecting door. I stood in my new quarters, surrounded by alien architecture, married to a queen who'd spent 3 centuries learning how to be merciful in a culture built on strength. My hand still ached where I'd cut it. The scar would be permanent. Good. I needed something to remind me that this was real. That I'd made a choice, not just been pushed by circumstances. Tomorrow I'd face the court. Tomorrow everything would get harder. But tonight I was alive, and I'd been given a chance to matter. After years of being nobody, that was enough. I fell asleep planning how to survive my first day as an alien queen's husband, and dreaming of human children teaching Gentari how to sing. The court assembled at dawn, though dawn, on this world meant the 7 moons fading as a white sun crested the horizon. I stood beside SHR's throne on a platform that overlooked hundreds of Gentari nobles, warriors, and administrators. They filled the chamber in careful arrangements that spoke of rank and faction. My translator worked overtime, feeding me information about house affiliations and political alignments that I struggled to remember. SHR wore ceremonial armor that caught the light like captured starfire. I wore the simple black clothing from yesterday because nobody had given me anything else. The contrast was deliberate, I realized. She looked every inch the powerful monarch. I looked exactly like what I was, a human out of his depth. The question was whether the court would see that as weakness or honesty. We convened to acknowledge the bonding. SHR's voice carried without amplification. Marcus Webber stands beside me as spouse and ally. Those who have concerns may speak. A ripple of movement. Then, a Gentari stepped forward from the left flank, scales marked with blue and silver patterns. I am Lord Kreshtal of the Third House. I question the wisdom of binding our queen to a species that cannot even agree among themselves. Humanity is fractured. Their diplomatic corps sends us this one, while their military fleets gather at our borders. How can we trust any alliance built on such contradiction? Before I could respond, SHR's tail lashed once. You question my judgment? I question the timing, my queen. Not your wisdom. It was a careful distinction. I understood enough of Gentari politics now to recognize the dance. Kreshtal wasn't challenging SHR directly. He was giving her an opening to explain, to justify. To show weakness through defensiveness. Actually, I said, and every eye in the chamber turned to me. Lord Kreshtal is right. Silence crashed down. SHR's head turned slightly toward me, but she said nothing. I stepped forward, closer to the edge of the platform. Humanity is fractured. We've been fractured since we climbed down from trees and started forming tribes. We argue constantly. We maintain fleets at borders even with allies. We sent me here with almost no preparation because different branches of our government can't agree on basic strategy. I met Kreshtal's eyes. But being fractured doesn't mean being weak. It means we're used to disagreement. Used to finding ways forward even when we don't agree. That's not a contradiction. That's practice. Another Jintari stepped forward, this one with green scales and a face scarred by old battles. Fine words. But Lord Kreshtal's point stands. Your diplomatic corps undermines you while military commanders position for war. Why should we trust the marriage alliance when your own people clearly don't? Because my people sent me here expecting me to fail, I said bluntly. Which means I have nothing to lose by succeeding. Lord Kreshtal, you questioned the timing. Let me question it differently. The diplomatic corps wanted this marriage to collapse. That tells me they're afraid of what happens if it works. Your own factions oppose it for the same reason. So maybe the timing is perfect. Maybe this is exactly when an alliance is most valuable, when both sides are scared enough of it to try to sabotage it. The green-scaled warrior tilted her head. Not quite approval, but consideration. You speak boldly for someone with no authority. I speak honestly because I have nothing else to offer. I glanced at SHRA, who remained perfectly still, watching. I'm not a diplomat. I'm not a soldier. 3 days ago I was scrubbing reactor cores for minimum wage. The only thing I know how to do is work hard and keep my word. If that's not valuable to you, then Lord Kreshtal is right to question this alliance. And if we test you? A new voice from the right side. A smaller Jintari with scales so dark they seem to absorb light. If we push until you break? Then you'll find out exactly how much pressure I can take. I held the speaker's gaze. But you'll also waste time we could spend building something useful. Your choice. SHRA rose from her throne. The chamber went silent. My spouse speaks with wisdom born of hardship. Those who wish to test him may do so. Those who wish to work with him may also step forward. But understand this. Her voice dropped to something dangerous. He is mine. Bound by blood and witnessed by the 7 moons. Any who harm him answer to me. Any who aid him earn my favor. Any who remain neutral will be judged by their inaction. She sat again. The message was clear. The court could challenge me, but there were consequences. Protection and threat balanced on the same blade. The dark-scaled Jintari bowed slightly. Then I offer challenge. Not of strength, but of understanding. You claim to value honesty, Marcus Webb. Then answer this, what is your purpose here? Truly. Beyond the political maneuvering and the arranged marriage. What do you want from this alliance? A test indeed. The wrong answer would mark me as ambitious or naive. The right answer. I wasn't sure what the right answer was. So I went with truth. I want to matter, I said quietly. I spent 6 years on that mining station knowing nobody cared if I lived or died. I was expendable. Forgettable. Then, suddenly, I'm told I'm getting married to someone important, and I thought maybe this was my chance to be part of something bigger than reactor maintenance. I looked around the chamber. I want this alliance to work because it means both our species survive. But I also want it to work because I'm tired of being nothing. If that makes me selfish, fine. At least it's honest. The dark-scaled Jintari studied me for a long moment. Then she bowed deeper. I am Lady Vexith of the 7th House. I will aid you, Marcus Webb. Not because I trust humanity, but because I trust your selfishness. It's understandable. Real. More trustworthy than pretty words about peace. Others moved forward. Some offering aid, others offering challenge. The court fractured into visible factions right there in front of me. SHRO watched it all with satisfaction. This was what she'd wanted, I realized. Not unity, but clarity. Now we knew who stood where. The rest of the morning was spent in formal introductions and subtle threats disguised as courtesy. By midday I'd met 73 nobles and remembered maybe 20 names. My head ached from translator strain and social navigation. But I'd survived the first test. Esichera dismissed the court, and led me to a smaller chamber where food waited. Actual food, not the nutrient paste from the shuttle. Someone had prepared both Jantari dishes and human approximations. I picked at something that might have been fruit, and tried not to collapse from exhaustion. You did well, Esichera said, settling onto a cushioned platform. Better than I expected, actually. I felt like I was drowning. You were. But you kept talking anyway. That's what matters. She consumed something that looked like raw meat with unsettling efficiency. Lady Vexitha's support is significant. The 7th House controls most of our agricultural production. Lord Kreshtal will remain hostile, but he won't move against you directly now. Not without more support. And the Green Warrior? General Threxal. She leads our home fleet. She's reserving judgment, which is actually positive. If she'd oppose you outright, you'd already be dead. Esichera said this casually, as if assassination was just part of politics. Maybe it was here. Comforting. It should be. She could have killed you 3 times during your speech. She didn't. That means she's curious. Esichera finished her meal and fixed me with those golden eyes. Tomorrow will be harder. Today they tested your words. Tomorrow they'll test your competence. I need you to learn our basic customs, our gesture language, and enough of our real language to understand conversations without the translator delay. In one day? You have tonight as well. I'll teach you. She rose fluidly. Come. We start now. The next 18 hours blurred together in a haze of information. Esichera was a patient teacher but demanded absolute focus. She taught me the gesture language first, tail positions that indicated mood, claw arrangements that modified meaning, head tilts that could change a polite question into a deadly insult. The Jantari communicated as much through body language as through words. Then came the spoken language. I couldn't form the clicks and hisses properly with my human mouth, but I could learn to recognize patterns, to hear the difference between similar phrases. Esichera drilled me relentlessly, correcting my pronunciation and making me repeat phrases until my throat was raw. Why are you doing this? I asked during a brief break. You could have assigned tutors. You're the queen, you must have more important things. This is the most important thing I'm doing. She interrupted me with a gentleness that somehow made the words more forceful. If you fail, I fail. If you succeed, we both succeed. I can't delegate that to tutors who might have their own agendas. So I teach you myself, and we build trust through shared exhaustion. We work through the night. By dawn I could recognize basic phrases and gestures, could respond appropriately to simple social situations. It wasn't mastery. It wasn't even competence. But it was enough to navigate a conversation without my translator making me look like a puppet. The second day's court session was different. Instead of formal addresses, the nobles broke into smaller groups, discussing trade agreements and military deployments and 100 other administrative details. Esichera circulated through the room, and I followed like a shadow, listening more than speaking. But I was listening in Jantari now, catching words before the translator rendered them. I saw Lord Kreshtal signal disdain with his tail, while speaking polite words to Esichera's face. I noticed General Threxal positioning herself between 2 hostile factions, playing peacemaker. I watched Lady Vexith quietly build a coalition of younger nobles who seemed more interested in innovation than tradition. You're learning, Esichera murmured during a brief moment of privacy. Your eyes are tracking the right people. It's like watching a very polite knife fight. That's exactly what it is. She gestured toward a cluster of nobles near the eastern wall. Those 4 are planning something. Their body language is too synchronized, too careful. They'll move against us soon. Against us or against me? Is there a difference? She smiled that crystalline smile. You're learning that too. The strike came 3 days later. Not an assassination attempt or a military challenge, but something subtler. A human transport ship appeared at the edge of Gentari space, broadcasting distress signals. They claimed engine failure and requested asylum. The court erupted in argument. Some wanted to help immediately. Others suspected a trap. Lord Kreshtal demanded my opinion in front of everyone, framing it as a test of loyalty. If we help them, he said, voice dripping with false concern, we show mercy to your people. But we also risk allowing a spy ship into our territory. If we refuse, we maintain security but appear hostile to humanity. What does our Queen's human spouse advise? Everyone turned to me. Shara remained neutral, letting me handle it. This was the real test. Whatever I said would be used against either her or me. I thought about those 15 humans who'd helped Gentari farmers while waiting to die. I thought about the choice Shara had made, the treason she'd committed to honor their decency. We should help them, I said. But I should go with the rescue team. Kreshtal's scales rippled with surprise. Explain. If it's a genuine distress call, I can help facilitate first contact. Human to human. Reduce their fear, explain the situation. If it's a trap or an intelligence operation, I'm the most expendable person here. Capture me and you've captured a mining technician. Not exactly a valuable hostage. I looked at Shara. And it proves that I'm not just words. That I'm willing to risk myself for this alliance. General Threxal stepped forward. I'll lead the rescue team. If the human speaks truth, we proceed carefully. If it's a trap, I'll ensure Marcus Webb dies quickly. Mercy, not torture. Comforting, I said dryly, and several Gentari made sounds that might have been laughter. Shara considered for a long moment. Then she nodded once. Proceed. But Marcus Webb wears a personal shield. If anyone fires on him, the device records everything before deactivation. His death will not go unwitnessed. An hour later I stood in a Gentari military shuttle, surrounded by warriors who could kill me without thinking, heading toward a human ship that might be full of soldiers ordered to extract me. The personal shield was a small device attached to my chest. It wouldn't stop bullets, but it would record everything. Cold comfort, but something. The human ship was small, maybe a crew of 8. It floated dead in space, running lights dark. General Threxal's team scanned it thoroughly before approaching. No weapons fire. No hidden ships nearby. Either it was legitimate, or an incredibly elaborate trap. We docked. The airlock cycled. I floated through into human air for the first time in 5 days and almost wept at how normal it smelled. The crew waited in the common area, 7 men and women in civilian clothes, faces tight with fear. I'm Marcus Webb, I said, raising my hands slowly. I know this is going to sound insane, but I'm married to the Gentari Queen. These warriors are here to help you. Nobody's going to get hurt if everyone stays calm. Their captain, a woman with gray hair and steady eyes, stared at me. Marcus Webb. The guy from mining station Theta 7? That's me. They said you were dead. The diplomatic corps sent a memorial message last week. You were killed in a reactor accident. She looked past me at General Threxal. What the hell is actually going on? Understanding crashed through me like cold water. The diplomatic corps hadn't just sent me to fail. They'd declared me dead. Wiped the record clean. If I'd died here for real, nobody would question it. And if I tried to return to human space, I'd be a ghost, someone with no legal existence. I think, I said carefully, I'm going to need your help. The ship's engine failure was real. A cascade failure in their main drive that would have left them stranded until someone found them, which in this empty region of space might have taken months. General Threxal's engineers had it repaired within hours. Gentari technology was frighteningly efficient. I spent that time talking with the human crew, learning what I'd missed. The border tensions were worse than I'd thought. 3 skirmishes in the past month, each side blaming the other. The diplomatic corps was pushing for increased military spending. And I, officially, was a casualty used to justify paranoia about Chantari aggression. "They're trying to start a war," the captain said quietly. "And they're using your death as propaganda. Then I need to not be dead." I looked at Threxal, who'd been listening without comment. "General, I need to ask a favor." "A big one." She tilted her head. "Speak." "I need to contact human authorities directly." "Bypass the diplomatic corps. Get word to someone who might actually care that they're being manipulated into conflict." I hesitated. I know that means revealing Chantari communication capabilities. I know that's a security risk. But if we don't stop this now, all the work SHRA and I are doing won't matter. There will be war. Threxal was silent for a long time. Then she made a gesture with her claws that my training let me recognize: respect for difficult truth. "You're willing to become a traitor to your own people," she said, "for this alliance. I'm willing to be honest about what's happening. If that's treason, fine. But I won't let my death be used to kill millions more." I met her eyes. "You have children, don't you? I saw the markings on your armor. 3 hatchlings. I'm trying to make sure they don't grow up in another war." She moved closer, studying me with unnerving intensity. Then she reached out and touched my shoulder with surprising gentleness. "You're either the bravest human I've met, or the stupidest. But I had 3 clutchmates die in your species' war. I won't allow another." She turned to her communications officer. "Open a channel. Priority 1. Direct to Queen Shara. Tell her we need immediate counsel." The message went out. While we waited for response, the human crew finished loading supplies the Chantari had provided. Food, water, spare parts. More generosity than anyone had expected. The captain kept staring at me like I was a puzzle she couldn't solve. "You really married her," she said. "The Chantari queen." "I really did." "Why?" "I thought about Shara teaching me her language through the night. About her confession in the garden. About the way she'd stood beside me in court, protecting me while still letting me fight my own battles. Because someone needed to try. And because she's worth trying for." The captain's expression softened. "You're in love with her." "I don't know. Maybe. Is it possible to love someone you barely know? Someone who isn't even human?" I shrugged. "But I trust her. And I think she trusts me. That might be more important than love." Shara's response came quickly: "Return immediately with the human crew. We'd hold a joint council, human and Chantari together. Force both sides to confront what was happening before the momentum toward war became unstoppable." The journey back was tense. The human crew was nervous, the Chantari warriors were suspicious, and I was caught in the middle trying to keep everyone calm. But we made it. We docked at the palace station, and I led the humans through corridors filled with aliens, watching them struggle with the same fear I'd felt 5 days ago. Had it only been 5 days? It felt like years. Shara met us in a conference chamber that had been hastily prepared for both species. Human-sized chairs alongside Chantari platforms. Air mixture adjusted for compromise. Translators for everyone. And guards. So many guards from both sides, watching each other with barely concealed hostility. "This is unprecedented," Lord Kreshtal said, scales bright with agitation. "Bringing humans directly into our council chambers, this is necessary." Shara cut him off. "Marcus Webb has discovered evidence of manipulation on both sides. We will hear it. We will evaluate it. And we will decide together how to proceed." I stood before the assembled leaders of 2 species and told them everything. The memorial message declaring me dead. The border skirmishes that seemed designed to escalate tension. The political factions on both sides that wanted war. The captain and her crew confirmed details, added context, provided documentation they'd gathered during their journey. When I finished, silence filled the chamber. Then, a human voice spoke from the video connection that linked us to Earth's government. "This is Admiral Chen of the United Defense Fleet. We've received confirmation that Marcus Webb was declared dead by the diplomatic corps without proper verification. The memorial was pushed through quickly, unusually so. We're investigating the authorization chain now. Another voice, Shintari this time. This is Lord Vexal, Lady Vexitha's sire. Our intelligence division has also noticed irregular patterns in the border incidents. Ships appearing in contested zones without proper authorization. Someone on our side wants this conflict to continue. Shara leaned forward. Then we root them out. Together. Human and Shintari intelligence cooperation, full transparency for the duration of this investigation. Those who try to manipulate us into war will face justice from both our peoples. It should have been impossible. Two species that had barely stopped killing each other 30 years ago, suddenly, working together to expose traitors in their own ranks. But Shara's voice carried absolute authority, and Admiral Chen seemed equally determined. Within hours, teams were forming, information was being shared, and the conspiracy started to unravel. It took 3 weeks to trace everything back to its source. Elements within the diplomatic corps, working with a radical Shintari faction led by Lord Kreshtal and 2 others. They'd been coordinating attacks, manipulating intelligence, pushing both sides toward conflict. The goal was simple: restart the war, but this time fight to total victory. Each side thought they could win decisively if they struck first. They were arrested simultaneously, broadcast live across both human and Shintari space. Shara herself delivered the charges against her own nobles, her voice cold as vacuum. Admiral Chen did the same with the human conspirators. The message was clear: anyone who tried to manipulate us into war would be treated as the enemy they were. I watched the broadcasts from Shara's private chambers, still processing the scope of what we'd uncovered. She entered quietly, exhaustion evident in every movement. For the first time since I'd met her, she looked small. It's done, she said, settling onto her platform. We've bought time. Maybe years. Maybe a generation. But the faction still exists. The fear still exists. This alliance remains fragile. I moved to sit beside her, careful not to crowd her space. But it exists. That's more than we had a month ago. Yes. She turned to look at me. Your diplomatic corps officially reinstated your existence today. They've apologized for the administrative error and cleared your record. You can go home now if you want. The marriage was political. You've fulfilled your obligation beyond anyone's expectation. I won't hold you here. My heart clenched. Is that what you want? What I want is irrelevant. You deserve the choice. Her tail moved in a gesture I'd learned meant sadness. You were sent here as a sacrifice. You've become something far more important. But that doesn't obligate you to stay. I thought about the mining station. About scrubbing reactor cores and being nobody. About the life I'd left behind without regret. Then I thought about the last month. Learning a new language. Navigating deadly politics. Standing beside an alien queen and somehow, impossibly, matching. I'm not going anywhere, I said. This marriage might have started as politics, but it's become something else. At least for me. You said you'd waited 300 years for someone to ask the right questions. Well, I've got about 300 more questions to ask. So unless you're tired of me. She moved so quickly I didn't see it coming. Her arms wrapped around me, careful of her strength, her scales warm against my skin. Shintari didn't hug. I'd learned that. It was a human gesture, something she'd clearly researched. Something she was trying for me. I hugged her back, this alien queen who'd saved my life in more ways than one. We stayed like that for a long time, two people from different species, different cultures, different worlds, choosing to build something together despite every reason it shouldn't work. You're staying, she said finally, voice thick with emotion I was only beginning to understand. I'm staying. Someone has to teach your people how to sing, right? Her laugh was warm and real and perfectly alive. Outside the window, 7 moons rose over an alien city. Guards patrolled the corridors, protecting peace that remained fragile and new. two species learned to trust each other one careful step at a time. And in a chamber high above it all, a human nobody and an alien queen held each other and dared to believe that maybe, just maybe, impossible things could become real if you were brave enough and stupid enough to try. 3 months later, I stood in the garden where Shara had first told me her story. I'd learned enough Shintari now to teach basic lessons to human diplomats. I'd survived 4 more assassination attempts, 3 political scandals, and 1 accidental violation of sacred customs that had taken weeks to smooth over. I'd made friends among the Shintari who believed in peace and enemies among those who didn't. I'd become someone who mattered. Shara found me there, moving with the fluid grace I'd come to recognize as contentment. "You're thinking," she said, settling beside me. "Dangerous habit. Usually. What about this time?" I gestured to the false stars above, the garden around us, the impossible life I'd somehow built. "I was thinking about those 15 humans. The ones who helped your people even though they knew they were going to die. Wondering if they knew what they were starting. They were just being kind. I don't think they planned to change history. Maybe that's the point. Maybe the biggest changes come from people just trying to be decent to each other. Not from grand strategies or political manipulation. Just from kindness when it's hard." Shara was quiet for a moment. Then she touched my hand, the gesture now familiar and full of meaning. "You've changed me, Marcus Webb. I'd forgotten that was possible. 300 years of building walls, staying strong, never showing weakness. Then you arrive and within weeks you're teaching me how to hug and making me remember why I wanted peace in the first place. I haven't changed you. I just reminded you who you already were." Semantics. But she smiled. "The human diplomatic delegation arrives tomorrow. They want to negotiate a formal treaty. It will take months, maybe years. There will be setbacks. Neither of our peoples fully trusts this peace. But we keep trying anyway. We keep trying anyway," she agreed. "Because you convinced me that impossible things are worth attempting. And because I've discovered that being married to you is significantly more interesting than ruling alone." I laughed. "That's a low bar. You'd be surprised how boring ruling can be. Endless councils, predictable politics, the same power struggles repeated for centuries." She leaned against me, a casual intimacy that would have been unthinkable months ago. "You make everything unpredictable. Infuriating sometimes, but never boring." We sat together as false night fell, watching stars that weren't quite real but were beautiful anyway. Somewhere in the palace, humans and Shintari were preparing for tomorrow's negotiations. Somewhere out in space, fleets still watched each other with wary suspicion. The peace remained fragile, constantly tested, always uncertain. But it existed. Because an alien queen had chosen mercy over vengeance 30 years ago. Because a mining technician had refused to be expendable. Because 2 people from different worlds had decided to trust each other when everyone said it was impossible. Maybe that was enough. Maybe that was everything. "Hey Shara?" I said quietly. "Yes? Thank you for not killing me when we first met. That worked out well." Her laugh echoed through the garden, crystalline and bright and perfectly, wonderfully alive. "Thank you for being brave enough to take my hand. That worked out even better." In the distance, 7 moons cast their light over a city where 2 species learned to live together. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't easy. But it was real, and it was growing, and it was ours. And sometimes that's exactly what humanity actually means.